The Praise of Chimney Sweepers by Charles Lamb. I like to meet a sweep. Understand me, not a grown sweeper. Old chimney sweepers are by no means attractive, but one of those tender novices, blooming through their first negritude, the maternal washings not quite effaced from the cheek, such as come forth with the dawn or somewhat earlier, with their little professional notes sounding like the peep peep of a young sparrow, or liker to the matin lark, should I pronounce him, in their aerial ascents not seldom anticipating the sunrise? I have a kindly yearning towards these dim specks, poor blots, innocent blacknesses. I reverence these young Africans of our own growth, these almost clergy imps, who sport their cloth without assumption, and from their little pulpits, the tops of chimneys, in the nipping air of a December morning, preach a lesson of patience to mankind. When a child, what a mysterious pleasure it was to witness their operation. To see a chit no bigger than one's self enter, one knew not by what process, into what seemed the fossus averni, to pursue him in imagination, as he went sounding on through so many dark, stifling caverns, horrid shades, to shudder with the idea that now surely he must be lost forever, to revive at hearing his feeble shout of discovered daylight, and then, O fullness of delight, running out of doors to come just in time to see the sable phenomenon emerge in safety, the brandished weapon of his art victorious like some flag waved over a conquered citadel. I seem to remember having been told that a bad sweep was once left in a stack with his brush to indicate which way the wind blew. It was an awful spectacle, certainly, not much unlike the old stage direction in Macbeth, where the apparition of a child crowned with a tree in his hand rises. Reader, if thou meetest one of these small gentry in thy early rambles, it is good to give him a penny. It's better to give him 2 pence. If it be starving weather, and to the proper troubles of his hard occupation, a pair of kibed heels, no unusual accompaniment to be superadded, the demand on thy humanity will surely rise to a tester. There is a composition, the groundwork of which I have understood to be the sweet wood yclept sassafras. This wood boiled down to a kind of tea, and tempered with an infusion of milk and sugar, hath to some tastes a delicacy beyond the China luxury. I know not how thy palate may relish it. For myself, with every deference to the judicious Mr. Reed, who hath time out of mind kept open a shop, the only one he avers in London, for the vending of this wholesome and pleasant beverage on the south side of Fleet Street, as thou approachest Bridge Street, the only Salopian house. I have never yet adventured to dip my own particular lip in a basin of this commended ingredients, a cautious premonition to the olfactories constantly whispering to me that my stomach must infallibly, with all due courtesy, decline it. Yet I have seen palates, otherwise not uninstructed in dietetical elegancies, sup it up with avidity. I know not what particular conformation of the organ it happens, but I have always found that this composition is surprisingly gratifying to the palate of a young chimney sweeper. Whether the oily particles, sassafras is slightly oleaginous, do attenuate and soften the fuliginous concretions which are sometimes found in dissections to adhere to the roof of the mouth in these unfledged practitioners, or whether nature, sensible that she has mingled too much of bitter wood in the lot of these raw victims, caused to grow out of the earth her sassafras for a sweet lenitive. But so it is that no possible taste or odor to the senses of a young chimney sweeper can convey a delicate excitement comparable to this mixture. Being penniless, they will yet hang their black heads over the ascending steam, to gratify one's sense if possible, seemingly no less pleased than those domestic animals, cats, when they purr over a new-found sprig of valerian. There is something more in these sympathies than philosophy can inculcate. Now, albeit Mr. Reed boasteth, not without reason, that his is the only Salopian house, yet be it known to thee, reader, if thou art one who keepest what are called good hours, thou art happily ignorant of the fact. He hath a race of industrious imitators, who from stalls and under open sky dispense the same savoury mess to humbler customers, at that dead time of the dawn, when, as extremes meet, the rake reeling home from his midnight cups, and the hard-handed artisan leaving his bed to resume the premature labours of the day, jostle not unfrequently to the manifest disconcerting of the former for the honours of the pavement. It's the time when in summer, between the expired and the not yet relumined kitchen fires, the kennels of our fair metropolis give forth their least satisfactory odours. The rake, who wishes to dissipate his overnight vapours in more grateful coffee, curses the ungenial fume as he passeth, but the artisan stops to taste and blesses the fragrant breakfast. The salop, the precocious herb-woman's darling, the delight of the early gardener, who transports his smoking cabbages by break of day from Hammersmith to Covent Garden's famed piazzas, the delight, and I fear too often the envy of the unpennied sweep. Him shouldst thou happily encounter, with his dim visage pendant over the grateful steam. Regale him with a sumptuous basin. It will cost thee but 3 halfpennies, and a slice of delicate bread and butter, an added halfpenny. So may thy culinary fires, east of the overcharged secretions from thy worse-placed hospitalities, curl up a lighter volume to the welkin. So may the descending soot never taint thy costly well-ingredienced soups, nor the odious cry, quick reaching from street to street, of the fired chimney, invite the rattling engines of 10 adjacent parishes to disturb for a casual scintillation thy peace and pocket. I am by nature extremely susceptible of street affronts, the jeers and taunts of the populace, the low-bred triumph they display over the casual trip or splashed stocking of a gentleman. Yet can I endure the jocularity of a young sweep with something more than forgiveness. In the last winter but one, pacing along Cheapside with my accustomed precipitation when I walk westward, a treacherous slide brought me upon my back in an instant. I scrambled up with pain and shame enough, yet outwardly trying to face it down as if nothing had happened, when the roguish grin of one of the young wits encountered me. There he stood, pointing me out with his dusky finger to the mob, and to a poor woman, I suppose his mother, in particular, till the tears for the exquisiteness of the fun, so he thought it, worked themselves out at the corners of his poor red eyes, red from many a previous weeping, and soot inflamed, yet twinkling through all with such a joy, snatched out of desolation, that but Hogarth has got him already. How could he miss him in the march to Finchley, grinning at the pieman? There he stood as he stands in the picture, irremovable, as if the jest was to last forever, with such a maximum of glee and minimum of mischief in his mirth, for the grin of a genuine sweep hath absolutely no malice in it, that I could have been content, if the honour of a gentleman might endure it, to have remained his butt and his mockery till midnight. I am, by theory, obdurate to the seductiveness of what are called a fine set of teeth. Every pair of rosy lips, the ladies must pardon me, is a casket, presumably holding such jewels. But methinks they should take leave to air them as frugally as possible. The fine lady or fine gentleman who show me their teeth show me bones. Yet must I confess, from the mouth of a true sweep a display, even to ostentation of those white and shining ossifications, strikes me as an agreeable anomaly in manners, and an allowable piece of foppery. It is as when a sable crowd turns forth her silver lining on the night. It's like some remnant of gentry not quite extinct, a badge of better days, a hint of nobility, and doubtless under the obscuring darkness and double night of their forlorn disguisement, oftentimes lurketh good blood and gentle conditions, derived from lost ancestry and lapsed pedigree. The premature apprenticements of these tender victims give but too much encouragement, I fear, to clandestine and almost infantile abductions. The seeds of civility and true courtesy, so often discernible in these young grafts, not otherwise to be accounted for, plainly hint at some forced adoptions. Many noble Rachels mourning for their children, even in our days, countenance the fact that tales of fairy spiriting may shadow a lamentable verity, and the recovery of a young Montague be but a solitary instance of good fortune out of many irreparable and hopeless defiliations. In one of the state beds at Arundel Castle a few years since, under a ducal canopy, that seat of the Howards is an object of curiosity to visitors, chiefly for its beds, in which the late Duke was especially a connoisseur, encircled with curtains of delicatest crimson, with starry coronets inwoven, folded between a pair of sheets whiter and softer than the lap where Venus lulled Ascanius, was discovered by chance, after all methods of search had failed, a noonday, fast asleep, a lost chimney sweeper. The little creature, having somehow confounded his passage upon the intricacies of those lordly chimneys, by some unknown aperture had alighted upon this magnificent chamber, and tried with his tedious explorations, was unable to resist the delicious invitement to repose, which he there saw exhibited, so creeping between the sheets very quietly, laid his black head upon the pillow, and slept like a young Howard. Such is the account given to the visitors at the castle. But I cannot help seeming to perceive a confirmation of what I have just hinted at in the story. A high instinct was at work in the case, or I am mistaken. Is it probable that a poor child of that description, with whatever weariness he might be visited, would have ventured under such a penalty as he would be taught to expect, to uncover the sheets of a duke's bed, and deliberately lay himself down between them, when the rug or the carpet presented an obvious couch, still far above his pretensions? Is this probable? I would ask if the great power of nature, which I contend for, had not been manifested within him, prompting to the adventure. Doubtless this young nobleman, for such my mind misgives me that he must be, was allured by some memory not amounting to full consciousness of his condition in infancy, when he used to be lapped by his mother or his nurse in just such sheets as he there found, into which he was now but creeping back as into his proper incunabular and resting place. By no other theory than this sentiment of a pre-existent state, as I may call it, can I explain a deed so venturous, and indeed upon any other system so indecorous, in this tender but unseasonable sleeper. My pleasant friend Jem White was so impressed with the belief of metamorphosis like this frequently taking place, that in some sort to reverse the wrongs of fortune in these poor changelings, he instituted an annual feast of chimney sweepers, at which it was his pleasure to officiate as host and waiter. It was a solemn supper held in Smithfield, upon the yearly return of the fair of St. Bartholomew. Cards were issued a week before to master sweep in and about the metropolis, confining the invitation to the younger fry. Now and then an elderly stripling would get in among us and be good-naturedly winked at, but our main body were infantry. One unfortunate wight, indeed, who, relying upon his dusky suit, had intruded himself into our party, but by tokens was providentially discovered in time to be no chimney sweeper. All is not soot which looked so, was quieted out of the presence with universal indignation as not having on the wedding garment. But in general, the greatest harmony prevailed. The place chosen was a convenient spot among the pens at the north side of the fair, not so far distant as to be impervious to agreeable hubbub of the vanity, but remote enough not to be obvious to the interruption of every gaping spectator in it. The guests assembled about 7. In those little temporary parlours, 3 tables were spread with napery, so fine as substantial, and at every board a comely hostess presided with her pan of hissing sausages. The nostrils of the young rogues dilated at the savour. James White, as head waiter, had charge of the first table, and myself, with our trusty companion Bigod, ordinarily ministered to the other 2. There were clamouring and jostling, you may be sure, who would get at the first table, for Rochester in his maddest days could not have done the humours of the scene with more spirit than my friend. After some general expressions of thanks for the honour the company had done him, his inaugural ceremony was to clasp the greasy waist of old Dame Ursula, the fattest of the 3, that stood frying and fretting, half blessing, half cursing the gentleman, and imprint upon her chaste lips a tender salute, whereat the universal host would set up a shout that tore the concave, while hundreds of grinning teeth startled the night with their brightness. Oh, it was a pleasure to see the sable younkers lick in the unctuous meat, with his more unctuous sayings, how he would fit the titbits to the puny mouths, reserving the lengthier links for the seniors, how he would intercept a morsel even in the jaws of some young desperado, declaring it must to the pan again to be browned, for it was not fit for a gentleman's eating. How he would recommend this slice of white bread or that piece of kissing crust to a tender juvenile, advising them all to have a care of cracking their teeth, which were their best patrimony. How genteelly he would deal with the small ale as if it were wine, naming the brewer and protesting if it were not good. He should lose their custom with a special recommendation to wipe the lip before drinking. Then we had our toasts. The king, the cloth, which, whether they understood or not, were equally diverting and flattering, and for a crowning sentiment which never failed, may the brush supersede the laurel. All these and 50 other fancies which were rather felt than comprehended by his guests would he utter, standing upon tables, and prefacing every sentiment with a "Gentlemen, give me leave to propose so and so," which was a prodigious comfort to those young orphans, every now and then stuffing into his mouth, for it did not do to be squeamish on these occasions, indiscriminate pieces of those reeking sausages, which pleased them mightily, and was the savouriest part, you may believe, of the entertainment. Golden lads and lasses must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. James White is extinct, and with him these suppers have long ceased. He carried away with him half the fun of the world when he died, of my world at least. His old clients look for him among the pens, and missing him, reproach the altered feast of Saint Bartholomew, and the glory of Smithfield, departed forever.